David Bell is an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology, and David will tell you about his wonderful research related to sports. You have probably read his research before because it got a lot of attention a number of years ago in the New York Times. He'll tell you why. In addition to being a wonderful researcher and professor, David has two boys, 8 and 11. So my hunch is you are researching sports and probably living it too. So join me in welcoming David Bell.
I'm an athletic trainer by trade, and so that means that I treat sports injuries and I treat injuries in physically active people. And I don't know if you know this or not, but a lot has changed in youth sports over the past probably 25 to 30 years. Oftentimes, because people have figured out how to make money off kids playing sports. So this is a Time article that we were actually featured in that shows that or estimates that youth sports is about a $15 billion industry, and that was back in 2018. So I imagine it's probably $20 billion easily now because it's just accelerating so quickly. So we know all the good things about sports, right? Being part of a team, leadership skills, and most importantly, being physically active. But there are some really alarming changes that have happened over the past 25 or 30 years, for example. So the research shows that about 70% of kids are going to drop out of sports by the age of 13. So that's pretty alarming because we want people to be physically active across the lifespan, right? Girls drop out at a rate of about 2 to 3 times that of boys. And if you're in a lower socioeconomic status, you're going to be more likely to drop out at a rate about 6 times that of other folks. So those are some really alarming stats in a society where we've turned to this kind of pay-for-play business. And parents are getting frustrated with it, kids are frustrated with it, coaches are frustrated with it. There are a few people that are just fine with it, right? Because they've been able to figure out the successful ways to navigate this particular system. And we feel like a lot of these changes are related to this idea of professionalization of sports and also sports specialization that kind of go hand in hand. So that's what my laboratory does. I operate the Wisconsin Injury and Sport Laboratory over in the Medical Sciences Center. And we're really focused on, kind of trying to highlight this problem that we feel like sports specialization is. Sports specialization is basically kind of playing a single sport all year round without many breaks. So for example, adults are going to ask kids to practice maybe the same sport 3 to 4 times a week. They want them to go to tournaments every weekend, right? And they want to do this 12 months out of the year. So unfortunately, what that means is that by the time kids are entering high school, around that age 13, 14, they've probably played that same sport for 6 or 7 years straight. And usually, for the entire year, right? And they don't have a whole lot of breaks. And because the way the system has been developed over time, it becomes really frustrating. People can't take breaks anymore, right? So if you don't play baseball with our team in the fall, you can't play baseball with our team in the spring. So you're either up or you're out. So we know a lot more about sports specialization because of our collaborative efforts here at UW-Madison with a lot of our research colleagues that are over in the School of Medicine as well. So for example, we now have a much better idea of the scope of the problem. So we know that about 35% of athletes can be classified as highly specialized. We know that girls are more likely to be classified as highly specialized compared to boys. And we also know that if you're highly specialized, you're at greater risk of injury. And we know that because of our work, we estimate that these injuries are going to cost us around $5 billion per year in direct medical costs. And that doesn't include like indirect medical costs, which are associated with mom and dad having to take time off work to take you to your doctor's appointment or to your physical therapy appointment for your injury. So in college and professional sports, right, we have lots of personnel who are dedicated to keeping athletes healthy, right? And injuries actually might just be kind of part of the business here. But in youth sports, we don't often have that. And so do we really want to expose our kids to the same risks that professional athletes would be exposed to? And unfortunately, we're seeing the injuries in kids that used to be reserved for athletes with like 12 years of Major League Baseball experience. You might have heard about one of them, right? Tommy John injury is an injury to the UCL. So that's the ulnar collateral ligament in your elbow. If you do a lot of throwing, you can rupture that ligament, and the surgery that you have is called Tommy John surgery, which is a reconstructive surgery. That was named after Tommy John, who was the first player to have that surgery back in 1974. Tommy John has his surgery in 1974. In 2004, the average age of someone receiving Tommy John surgery was 27 years of age. Fast forward to 2014, and the average age dropped down to 17 years of age. That was the average age of someone having that surgery. And we don't just see this in baseball. We see this in all sports across a wide variety of different injuries. Tommy John just happens to be one of the famous ones. And the problem is that these injuries follow people over their life, right? So I actually talk to a lot of people that say, I would really like to just be able to crawl on the floor and play with my kids, but I can't because my knee hurts, right? And I can't get up because of my hip. And there's no data that says this early sports specialization pays off in any way, shape, or form. If you get a college scholarship, you're going to win the lottery. If you've been following some of the things that have been happening with college sports and the name, image, likeness, I have a fear that this is just going to get worse rather than getting better, and it's going to become quite a severe problem. So I often say that health is a competitive advantage. So how can we keep our young athletes healthy? Well, we put together this this infographic with some of our youth sports specialization recommendations that are on it. If you want to take the QR code and share it with your friends and family, that would be great. But these really are designed to help decrease the risk of injury and burnout. So some of these, I know that might be hard for some of you to read, but for example, like delay specializing as long as you can. Only play on one team at a time if it's possible and play multiple sports, right? We hear stories of people that are like, well, I have 3 baseball games this weekend. I'm like, well, for the same team? Well, no, for all different teams. But, that leads us to a whole nother conversation, right, with that athlete. Try not to play the same sport more than 8 months out of the year. Again, this is really hard. At the end of high school volleyball, which is in November after the state championships, the next week is when club AAU tryouts occur for club volleyball. So because of the way the system has been built, it's really hard to follow some of these recommendations. And if we think that our college athletes can get 1 day of rest per week, we think it's entirely reasonable that youth athletes should be able to get 2 days of rest per week. I hope you don't think I'm crazy for saying that. And by rest, I mean like active rest, right? You don't need to sit on the couch and play video games, but have time to go be a kid. So these recommendations exist. We also have data that shows that nobody knows about them. So congratulations. You are now a part of a small segment of people who now know about these recommendations. So do scan the QR code. I'm entirely serious about that, and please share it with your family and friends. And again, this work has definitely been supported by the Impact 2030 campaign, so thank you very much. I appreciate your time.